How is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Down Podcast, where we talk everything Bears every day of the week. Does Alex Bars deserve a shot at the guard position, and will the offensive line prosper in 2020? We're going to be answering these questions and many more today in episode 5 of our positional review series. Welcome back to the show, guys. I would like to say before I introduce myself and my co-host, we are grinding to 2K subscribers, getting close to 1.7K. So if you are new to the channel and want Bears content every day of the week, do us a favor, click the red button to subscribe, click the bell for notifications whenever we post, and do us a favor and drop a like on this video. I am your host, Chris Malpe, and today I'm joined with my co-host, Jaylen McClinton. Jaylen, how's it going, buddy?
It feels good. I'm doing pretty good. I don't know when this episode is going to be uploaded, but the last couple episodes I missed, so good to be back.
Absolutely. This will go up on Thursday, and I would like to say, if any news breaks this weekend, which I doubt it will, it's a pretty dead time, I'm actually going to be up at Lake Geneva. All of our videos going up this weekend will be pre-recorded. If there is something big that happens, I'll get one of the people at Bear Down to record something and get it up. But as for now, it's a pretty dead time in the season, and we are back with offensive line positional review. We were going to break it up into guards, tackles, and center, but there's really no need for that with the Bears' offensive line. Not many changes this offseason. So let's get right into it. We're going to be breaking down basically the players by positional group. So we'll go through the tackles, the guards, and then obviously Cody Whitehair there at center. So let's go through the tackles first, obviously, most importantly. Charles Leno Jr., a Pro Bowler in 2018. He had 0 penalties that year. When he made the Pro Bowl, the Bears went 12-4, won the NFC North, and obviously the double doink, we don't need to get into that. 12 penalties in 2019. To break those down for you, 6 holding penalties, 3 false starts, 1 offside, and that only adds up to 10, so I'm a little bit confused. Pro Football Reference has me a little bit confused. But he also allowed 6 sacks per Pro Football Focus. On the opposite side of him, we've got Bobby Massey, who actually wasn't that bad in 2019. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't say he always allows for the cleanest pocket, but he only had 2 penalties in Chicago, 1 sack allowed. It was actually his best season in Chicago when you really look at it. If you look at his other years, he had 4 and 5 penalties in 2017 and 2018. So Bobby Massey was actually decent. Jaylen, I'm going to pass it to you. I mean, obviously, when you look at Leno, it looks like it can't get that much worse. And Massey is still aging, but he was still pretty solid there in 2019. So I don't want to ask you if you're going to see better play out of tackles in 2019, but do you think it can get much worse?
Nah, not at all. We're obviously going to talk about somebody else that we were, talking about before the show began, but he had less amount of penalties than the player that we're also going to talk about. So that just shows you how bad of a season he had. I feel like how worse can you get? We brought in a different offensive line coordinator in Juan Castillo. He's rebuilt offensive lines before in the past. So if he can come in and we have an average season that's not below average like we did last year, then that's definitely a huge upgrade for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine if Bobby Massey plays the same as he did in 2019 here in 2020, but I think the main point as far as the tackles go is Leno improving. He showed that he can be a Pro Bowler in 2018, and you might say that everything in 2018 for the Bears was like sunshines and rainbows and everything was going well, but you have to play to a certain standard to be a Pro Bowler, and with a lot of those penalties, at least for him, being false starts, I mean, you can really touch up on that, and I expect Juan Castillo to get in here and at least help Leno bring those numbers down, and I expect that he will improve here in 2020. Let's look at the guards now. Obviously, first and foremost, we have to look at the second-round pick from, I believe, 2017, James Daniels. He's going to be opposite 2018. My bad.
Yeah.
James Daniels. He's only had 5 penalties in his career and has been very sound regardless. I think one of the most underrated pieces on the offensive line. He's only allowed 1 sack during his career in Chicago. A great piece of that interior offensive line with Cody Whitehair. Before we get into this other player, because I think we should break these down one by one, Jaylen, I want to ask you, is James Daniels the entering his 3rd year out of Iowa? Is he one of the most underappreciated players on the Bears?
Definitely, he's not talked about a lot. In 2018, his rookie season, he didn't start right away. He came in later on, or came in midway into the season, and he had a pretty good season. Especially as a rookie, when he was still young at the time. I think he was like 20 and during his rookie season. And for him to have a decent season like he did, I feel like it was probably only only one other good rookie guard that was that had a better season than him, and that's Quentin Nelson, who's a 2-time All-Pro. So I'm not surprised, but I definitely feel like he's underappreciated. This season after him and Cody switched back, because he started for some reason, Nagy felt like it was okay for him to start him at center instead of guard, which he played in 2018. After they switched back, he played good again. So I feel like he's underappreciated. He's still young. I think he's like 21 or 22 going into his third year. So we still have a lot of time for him to, still learn and develop.
I do think it is nice to have that versatility on the offensive line with Whitehair and Daniels, just in case, one player doesn't match up well against a defensive player and one can match up well against another. Obviously, Whitehair and Daniels have both played center. I'm an Iowa Hawkeyes fan. Daniels, when he was at the University of Iowa, he did play a lot of center there. So let's look at who's across from him, and this is a very interesting one. And by the way, James Daniels is most definitely underappreciated. So looking at the Bears offseason acquisitions, they did bring in Jermaine Ifedi. It hurts me to say that, but he is here in Chicago. He will be moved back to guard. Ryan Pace made that prominently clear at his first press conference when he announced that there was an open competition at quarterback. One of the big things he stressed is that Ifedi will be back at guard. Juan Castillo will be working on him. So that is actually interesting. But looking at Ifedi, these are pretty ugly stats to read. 13 penalties in 2019 at the tackle position. 10 in 2018. His best year did come in 2016 when he had 7 penalties. 6 of them were false starts. So that's something similar to Leno, 3 false starts there in 2019. That's something that can be easily improved upon, I think, and Juan Castillo will work on that. He also had 6 sacks allowed in 2019, so equaling Charles Leno. There's not a lot of hope when you look at this pick, or look at this guard, Jaylen, but do you believe that Ifedi can improve moving back to guard? I mean, obviously, he wasn't anything incredible at guard in Seattle, but he was definitely better. Kyle Long obviously hits the road for retirement. Best of luck to him in retirements. But Jaylen, I mean, it's hard to talk about this, and I really hope to God that he can be better here in 2020. But what do you think about Jermaine Ifedi?
I feel like somebody else is gonna start, but if he does, you can't get much worse than last year. You had more penalties than Charles Leno, who had a terrible season last year. So if he can, lower his penalties, lower his sacks, which is gonna be huge for us because our O-line gave up a lot of sacks. A lot of people like to blame some of them on Mitch, which I could understand because he was on the ball a lot. But you can't get much worse. I don't expect him to improve, but if he does, I'm not going to be mad at all about it.
Ifedi simply needs to improve, or he's not going to probably be in the NFL for much longer. He's here on a 1-year veterans minimum deal. And obviously, looking at the center position, you can't really complain about Cody Whitehair. He's really the anchor on this offensive line. 3 sacks allowed in 2019. 2 of those were to Aaron Donald with the LA Rams, so I don't really blame him there. There's not much to discuss with Whitehair. He's incredible. I'm pretty sure you agree with that, Jaylen. He's been awesome for a while.
Yeah, probably the most reliable offensive line we had for a couple years now.
Yeah, I believe he was a 2nd-round pick in the 2016 NFL draft, maybe 2015?
Yeah, it was 2016.
2016, yeah. Okay, now getting into a few questions. I mean, obviously there's not a lot to cover when you look at the offensive line. It absolutely needs to improve, but the Bears didn't do a ton to address it here in 2020. Geez, I can't speak. It's late at night. But looking at the depth chart, I mean, obviously there's a lot of interesting prospects. One of those that we have been dying to bring up for a while now is Alex Bars, an undrafted free agent from 2019 out of Notre Dame, a school that's been known to produce some incredible offensive linemen. Bars has been pretty solid when they've given him reps in the preseason. Obviously, that guard position is something that's really up for grabs right now. You've got Arlington Hambright in there as well, someone who was a tackle but is shifting to guard out of Colorado. He was a 5th-year grad transfer, spent some time at Oklahoma State. So it's looking like it's going to be between Rashad Coward, a name that probably should have been brought up earlier but wasn't, obviously a former defensive tackle who switched over to offensive line, another intriguing prospect just because he's raw. And then you've got, obviously, Ifedi and Alex Bars and Hambright. So, Jaylen, I know you're high on Alex Bars. Do you think he deserves a shot here to win the starting job?
I definitely think he deserves a shot. Last year when he was cut, for the first 53 going into the season, a lot of Bears fans were shocked. Like you said, he was very versatile in the preseason. We played him at both tackle and guard, and he played pretty well. So when we released him coming into the season, I was very surprised, especially that Kyle Long is. Even though I love Kyle a lot, You can't really trust him due to the injuries he had the last couple seasons. So I feel like he was definitely going to be a great depth piece, and if he needs to come in, he's going to be reliable. But like I said, we cut him. We brought him back later, or we brought him back onto the team later into the season. So I feel like, like I said, he's versatile. Coming into the NFL draft, he actually tore his ACL in his senior season, and a lot of people, projected that if he didn't get hurt, that he would have been maybe a day two, maybe early day three prospect. And for him, get him at undrafted like we did, only because we really had Harry Heinstein, who was his former offensive line coach. Obviously, he's not here anymore, because we fired him. But if he can, like I said, he's versatile. He's come from Notre Dame, who's produced a lot of good offensive linemen. I definitely feel like he deserves a chance. I'm really big on him too. If he can stay healthy, I think he can be reliable and produce.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at offensive linemen, the Bears have had some success in the later rounds. Obviously Charles Leno was a 7th-round pick in the 2014 draft out of Boise State. So Bars is definitely an interesting one. I think one thing that Matt Nagy always preaches about is that competition breeds winners. And the more the merrier in this situation. I mean, the offensive line needs to get better. Have these guys scrap it out, and whoever's best is the one that's going to deserve the shot. And I think Bars definitely deserves to get in on that competition. Next, let's take a look at the two 7th-round draft picks from this year, because obviously I just mentioned Charles Leno was a 7th-round draft pick, and you can say whatever you want about Leno this year. The fact that he's starting in this league after being a 7th-round draft pick is frankly very impressive. You look at Latavius Simmons, 6'6", 315 pounds, the 227th overall pick. He's going to play tackle, and then obviously Arlington Hambright there at guard, someone who could actually compete for the starting spot. Has pretty good measurables and looked very good on tape. So, Jalen, I want to ask you, out of these two guys, I mean, obviously it's a little bit hard to predict with 7th-round draft picks, but if one of these guys were to make the active roster, do you think it's Latavius Simmons as a backup tackle to a guy like a Massey or Leno? Or is it Arlington Hambright possibly getting a spot even? He could even be the starter. We don't know what he's going to bring to camp. Or being a backup guard, because obviously, there's more guards than there are tackles, I would say, at this point on the roster. So if one of the guys makes the 53-man roster, do you think it's Latavius Simmons or Arlington Hambright?
I'm going with Latavius Simmons. I feel like there's not a lot of competition for that backup tackle spot at both positions, whether it's right or left, compared to guard, where you have, a Fetty at Bars, Rashad Coward, and then Arlington Hambright, who's not guaranteed a spot due to he was being a 7th-round draft pick. So I would have to probably go with Latavius. He's, like you said, he's 6'6", huge. He still has potential in this league. I feel like with just a little more development, maybe he can be our next Charles Leno, but obviously not play like Charles Leno did last year.
Yeah, I mean, you also have to look at, and this is an interesting one that we're going to talk about right here after this question, actually, is Jason Spriggs, someone who's had a little bit of success, obviously has been injured a lot during his time with Green Bay. He'll be an interesting prospect for Juan Castillo as well. A 2nd-round pick in that 2016 draft by the Packers, has played 37 games in his career with only 9 career starts. He'll be at the backup tackle, but I also agree with you. I'm going to go with Latavius Simmons. Not only is he an absolute beast, and he's been able to stonewall defensive lineman there at Tennessee State. If you look at FBS schools, Tennessee State obviously probably not the best competition, but they allowed the 2nd least sacks in college football last year. Latavius Simmons, definitely someone who can come in there and probably be a decent backup. Yeah, I mean, that's basically all there is to say about that. Next, moving on to Jason Spriggs, an interesting one that we haven't mentioned yet. The Bears also signed him to a 1-year veteran minimum deal. I mean, we saw how sloppy Leno got in 2019, Jalen, and Spriggs is someone who has shown that he can be decent in the past if he is healthy. So do you think, I feel like if Leno or Massey goes down, they're both getting up there in age, Spriggs is someone who can come in. So do you see any potential opportunities for him? Because he's someone who seems like a lock to probably make this 53-man roster if he can stay healthy.
Now with Jason Spriggs, I don't know much about him. He's obviously his career hasn't started like he wanted to. He's been going through a lot of injuries, and obviously he didn't get re-signed. But I think it actually came out that the Bears wanted him in the 2016 draft before the Packers jumped ahead of us to grab him, and that that we ended up trading down and getting Cody Whitehair, which is perfectly fine with me. Like I said, Cody has been one of our most reliable offensive linemen, and he's a Pro Bowler. So, like I said, I don't know much about him. If he can stay healthy, I definitely feel like he can be a serviceable backup. He won the 2nd round for a reason. He obviously had potential coming out, so if he can stay healthy, that's great. And he's only on we got him for cheap on a 1-year contract. So
Yeah, you look at him. I mean, obviously he's had some injury issues throughout his time. Was placed on injury reserve with a hamstring injury in 2017 and never really rebounded from that. Cleared waivers there in 2019 after he was waived by the Packers. Replaced by Brian Bulaga, who obviously isn't even with the Packers anymore. He's with the Los Angeles Chargers. And Rick Wagner's up there now with Green Bay. But it's another interesting prospect. I mean, competition is competition. When you look at it, if the tackles aren't better, I expect them to be. But Spriggs is someone who could step in there and has at least a little bit of experience and maybe could be an interesting prospect. Next, obviously, the 29th ranked line in the league in 2019, and that absolutely needs to be better. So, Jaylen, I want to ask you, obviously not that many additions, no flashy names brought to this team as far as the offensive line goes, but do you think the line's going to prosper in 2020? You think they'll finish better than 29th overall? We've talked about this in previous vids and episodes of Uncut, but where do you see them finishing in regards to offensive line rankings here?
Like I said, I just want them to be average. You can't get. You obviously can, but we still brought in a lot of. Now I wouldn't say talent, but players that can push other players to become better players. And like I say, you can't get much worse than 29 in the league. I just want us to be in that 15 range or 17, which is basically in the middle for the NFL. So if we can be average and either quarterback has time in the pocket to deliver throws and we have a run game, because David Montgomery not have a run game at all. It would be plays where he snapped the ball and there's a defender right in his face, which cannot happen if you want your running back to produce, especially because we had high hopes on David Montgomery. So if we can have a nice clean pocket for Mitch or Foles and some running lanes for David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen, then I would say that's an upgrade for our offensive line.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any big promises here. To be honest, I don't expect it to be a ton better. I mean, obviously, top 16 is ideal. In the 12 to 18 range is ideal, but I'm just going to say they're going to be top 25, which is an improvement. We need David Montgomery to be better. Earlier today, and you'll hear it tomorrow when the Brian McFadden interview goes up, he said Montgomery needs to be better, and he said he kept showing flashes, and one thing that Bryant didn't bring up is that the offensive line was bad, but David Montgomery definitely needs some help, as will whoever is under center, whether that be Mitchell Trubisky or Nick Foles. So I expect that the line will prosper. They'll be salvageable, I guess, this upcoming year. And I hope Juan Castillo can work some magic, because if not, it could get very ugly. So obviously, earlier we talked about Jason Spriggs. And looking at Leno and Massey, they're both guys that are going to be cap casualties in the future if they can't play well. So if you had to move on from one of these two tackles, would it be Leno or Massey? I mean, obviously, you look at Leno, he did make a Pro Bowl and then had a terrible season. Massey isn't incredibly flashy, but he's been a little bit more consistent throughout his career, but nothing incredible. So which one would you move on from if you had to start Jason Spriggs? Would you pull Leno out or would you pull out Bobby Massey?
I would probably pull out Bobby Massey. He's going to be 31 when the season starts, or whenever the season starts. He's going to be 31 years old. They're both on a decent amount of they're getting paid a decent amount of money for their contract worth. Charles Leno is still a couple years younger than him, so if we had to get rid of either of the tackles, I'm gonna have to go with Bobby Massey just based off his age.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I mean, there's not much more for me to say. I just hope Leno can prosper, and I don't think he can get much worse for him. Obviously, David Montgomery was pretty solid there in 2019 behind the 29th ranked offensive line in the league, 1,074 all-purpose yards, 7 touchdowns. Jaylen, I want to ask you, can this line hold up enough here in 2020 to get David Montgomery 1,000 rushing yards?
That's the hope. I feel like David Montgomery is one of the biggest breakout candidates on this offense, other than Anthony Miller for me. If this line can hold up, like I said, he already showed flashes of capability of being a good running back. He can catch out the backfield. He won't go down without a fight. So if this offensive line could just give him a little open lanes, then he's definitely going to get over 1,000 yards.
Yeah, as long as it's better, you would assume that David Montgomery can get over 1,000 yards. I'm pulling up here his exact number of rushing yards.
It was 890 something.
I think it was 889. Yeah, 889 rushing yards, 3.7 yards per rush, which is okay. Obviously, he's incredibly elusive, 6 rushing touchdowns on the ground. I think he'll get 1,000 rushing yards, and I think the line will prosper enough for him to be able to do that. Before we grade the offensive line, one more question about free agent offensive linemen. There's been a lot of talk about a ton of free agent offensive linemen this entire offseason, basically. And normally we wouldn't talk about it in a positional review, but this will be the last time that we touch on the offensive line until probably the middle of training camp. So two interesting prospects that are still out there are obviously Larry Warford and Kelechi Osemele. So let me quickly read up on them a little bit. If you look at Warford, he was a third-round pick in the 2013 draft by the Detroit Lions. Obviously, he has spent most of his career here, or at least the second half, with the New Orleans Saints, where he has prospered. Made the Pro Bowl the last 3 years, was on the Pro Football Writers of America all-rookie team. Pro Football Focus ranked him the 11th best guard in the league there in 2019. He was also on the Pro Football Focus Team of the Year, so that's pretty impressive. Obviously, the Saints move on from him after they draft Cesar Ruiz. An interesting move, but Ruiz is a great pick who is also very versatile, someone who definitely, I wouldn't have been mad if he fell to Chicago. I'm sure they probably would have taken him if he did fall there to 43. I'm not saying I'm complaining about our draft picks, but that would have been maybe a little bit too good to pass up. Looking at Osemele, spent a lot of time with the Baltimore Ravens from 2012 to 2015, Oakland Raiders for 3 years and 1 year with the New York Jets. Throughout his career, he is 30 years old. He's dealt with a little bit of injuries. Still similar age to Massey, but a lot more accolades for him. At least he's a Super Bowl champion, two-time Pro Bowler, also made the first-team All-Pro in 2016, was an All-American at college at Iowa State in 2011. So, I have to beg to answer this question. It feels like a no-brainer to sign one of these guys. I mean, Osemele in all the games that he's played has started 96 for 96 starts, and obviously Larry Warford is also an interesting option there. So should we bring in one of these guys? And Jaylen, pick your poison, Warford or Osemele, if the Bears do try and bring in one of these guys.
If they're available, if they're still available, especially if we don't sign any more players, which I don't think we will, I definitely feel like we should sign one. I'm gonna go with Larry Watford. I think
Warford.
Warford, how we pronounce his name. It came out that we weren't interested in him anymore. It's probably due to his the price, the amount of money he was looking for. That was like I think almost a month ago. So I'm pretty sure his price has failed. So if we can get him for an affordable price, I wouldn't mind bringing him at all. Especially because over Osemele, he got cut last season because he was having mad problems with injuries, and so I'm gonna have to go with Larry right here, especially because he's a 3-time former Pro Bowler.
Yeah, I mean, made the Pro Bowl 3 seasons in a row. That speaks for itself. And you look at the Houston Texans, the other team that was interested in him, and I forget who it was, but they just actually extended their right guard, so it seems like it takes them out of the equation. As long as no other team picks him up for the price he wants, I feel like he could fall to Chicago in the middle of training camp, and that would be the perfect situation. I mean, obviously, if you look at them head-to-head, Osemele's probably the more attractive option, but he's also had some injuries throughout his career, so that's something that's bothersome. But I think Warford would easily be the plug-and-play right guard, and that's something that is definitely interesting. So obviously, Jaylen, we wrap up all these episodes by grading the position, and this episode's actually been longer than I thought. I didn't think we were going to get 20 minutes out of the offensive line, but we're at 23 minutes right now, so I'm going to give it to you first. I mean, you can grade this however you want. Normally I compare the offensive line to last year to this year. Sometimes I grade it on how I think they're going to perform. It's kind of a mixture of the two. I'm going to actually go first here since I was kind of pondering in my head, but I know what I want now. I'm going to give them a D+, if I'm being honest. I think a C is a little bit high of a grade before we see how these guys can perform. Obviously, there's a lot of pieces on the line that we hope work out. Guys like Jason Spriggs, guys like Alex Bars, hopefully Charles Leno can be better, but we really don't know that. And the line has been trending downwards for a year now. Obviously, I hope they can prosper. But, I think that grade would definitely move up to like a C if they did sign Warford. But yeah, I'm going to give them a D+. I mean, it's still one of the weaker spots on the team. I expect that they're going to be a little bit better, but they're not going to blow anyone out of the water whatsoever. And if they do blow anyone out of the water, then I am blown out of the water. So, Jaylen, I'm going to pass it back to you. What would you grade this offensive line?
So I'm going to have to totally agree with you. At first, I was going to give it like a C, just like in the middle, but this offensive line is not even worth a passing grade yet. We don't know what's going to happen at the right guard position. So if we do sign Larry Warford, then I'm going to push it up to a C too. But right now with a huge hole at right guard, I have to give it a D. It's basically just wait and see for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to episode 5 of our positional review series. If you want more content from us, head over to our website, beardown.com. There's blogs, articles, and columns up on there most every day. We're trying to pump out content for you guys. If you are on Instagram, you can find the links to our fan pages down in the description. And while you are on the app, follow us on Instagram at beardown. You can also find us at the same username on Twitter. Jaylen McClinton, we're pumping out more videos tomorrow. Back at the grind. It feels good. Any last words, buddy?
Bear down, stay safe. We literally just opened back up, but we're closing again with these protests, which is a very sensible reason for why we're closing back. But still, like I said, just stay safe. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, definitely. At least for you and I, buddy. The craziest times we have lived in, except for maybe a couple stock market crashes like back in 2008, 2009, but I'm almost too young to remember that. So do us a favor, Bears fans, continue to stay safe. It's been a pleasure to be your host tonight. Once again, my name is Chris Malpe. I can't stress it enough. I'm going to say it again. Do us a favor, Bears fans, continue to stay safe. And as always, bear down. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.